All right. All right. This is week 13 of engineering ethics at NJIT. This is November 28th. Welcome back from break. This is week 13. We're going to be starting the last two lessons of the class. Lesson 13 this week, lesson 14 next week. We're both going to be on different aspects of artificial intelligence. And then lesson 15 is our final week. Lesson 15 is really just a wrap up of what did you learn, what did you enjoy about the class, and so on. So it's really just these last two, lesson 13 and 14 lessons left for the class. Both lessons are going to be in different aspects of automation, or about artificial intelligence. So let me go ahead and just jump into the lesson here. All right, like I said, we're on lesson 13. This week we're going to be talking about autonomy. Autonomy of both weapon systems and of drones and cars and so on. Let me load up some of the stuff here. So if you remember last time we had a sort of general discussion about artificial intelligence, what makes something intelligent. There are lots of things to talk about in this area, and I sort of rushed through a lot of it. The really big thing I wanted to emphasize was the Turing test, right? So, question: Can computers think? The response to this question, there's lots of different responses to this question, but Turing's response to this question is to say, well, how do we know that human beings can think? We know human beings can think because they behave in certain ways. So if we want a machine to think, then we have to get the machine to also behave in those same ways. So Turing's idea is that if we can build a machine that behaves just like a human, then we should judge it just like a human. If a human being making that performance, if we judge them as intelligent, then if a machine can make that same performance, then we should judge them as intelligent as well. Kasparov is a great chess player. Everyone thinks that Kasparov is a genius because of how well he plays chess. Deep Blue can beat Kasparov at chess. And so if we think Kasparov is intelligent because of how well he plays at chess, then when Deep Blue beats Kasparov, we should consider Deep Blue just as intelligent. And again, the argument here is on the basis of fairness. It would be unfair to judge machines by a different standard than we judge the human beings. Let me know if everything's working for you, Edward. So Turing has the standard of intelligence as human performance. I didn't really go over his essay last time, but maybe I should do that this time. So in Turing's 1950 paper, he proposes the imitation game. He talks about how machines work. And then he goes over a bunch of objections. Section 6 is just a bunch of objections that people might have to his views. So he talks about a lot of them. The theological objection that God gives human souls, but he doesn't give machine souls. The heads in the sand objection. He goes over a bunch of these different objections, mathematical objection. The objection from consciousness. But I want to point out the objection from various disabilities. So the argument from various disabilities is machine cannot be intelligent because they can't do X for some X. And there's usually lots of different versions of this X. Last time we talked a little bit about John Searle's Chinese room. Searle argues that machines can't understand because machines only do symbolic processing. Understanding requires semantics more than just syntax, so machines can never understand the meanings of their terms. Right, so this is a claim that machines can't do some X. Machines can't understand. That there's some function that human beings can do that we can understand things, and machines can't do that thing. Searle thinks machines can understand, but lots of people give all sorts of different things that machines can't do. They can't have emotions. They can't fall in love. Turing gives us a little list. The machines cannot be kind, cannot be resourceful, beautiful, friendly, have initiative, have a sense of humor, tell right from wrong, make mistakes, fall in love, enjoy strawberries and cream, make someone fall in love with it, learn from experience, use words properly, be the subject of your own thoughts, have as much diversity of behavior as man, do something really new. The machines can never do these things. A big list of things the machines cannot do. I didn't put the little let me see if I can find this really quickly. Sorry, I'm getting lost. Let me try one more place. Yes, found it. Yeah, this is a little comic I like. It gives a sense of some of the issues with these kinds of machines can't do X arguments. Yeah, so in this, here's the human being, the human race. Only a machine can play baseball. Only a machine can have common sense. Only a human can. I'm sorry. Only a human can play baseball. Only a human can have common sense. Only a human can review a movie. Only a human can translate speech. Only humans can clean house. It's sort of frantically writing these things that only human beings can do. They put up on the wall. And then here's all the sort of failed. Only humans can do. Only humans can improvise jazz. Only humans can guide a missile. Only humans can understand natural language. Of course, machines have done all of these things. And in fact, machines have done some of the things up on the wall here also. For instance, only human can translate speech. Well, yeah, so just a few days ago, Google, on their research blog, released a discussion of their new translation app. They use neural networks to do this. And it used to be the case that in order to translate from English to Japanese, say, or English to Korean, you'd have to actually train a system to do that specific translation, right? So there was a system that was trained specifically to do English to Japanese, and a different system to do specifically English to Korean. And Google translates something like 103 different languages, 140 billion words a day. So for all these different languages that they translate between, you have to have maps between English and whatever the other languages or whatever the two languages are. You need some translation, and in order to build that translation, you have to be pretty delicate. They have to be highly designed by usually a human going through and augmenting the machine learning on its own. So usually these are very special purpose, highly sophisticated translations going between these different languages. And what Google just announced is that it can do this in the general case. So it has a neural network now that can take any arbitrary language and translate it to any other language using the same system. So it used to be that these have to have different systems for each of the different translations. And now they can have the same system do any translation. And what's really interesting about this is that it allows for what they call zero-shot translations, which means translating languages that it hasn't seen before. So for instance, if this system was trained up to translate between English and Japanese and English and Korean, but it didn't have any Japanese-Korean translation native to it, well, the system can do it in one shot. So it can do all these other translations, and then if you give it Japanese and tell it to turn it into Korean, it can figure that out. It doesn't do quite as well as a human translator, but the fact that you can do any translation at all without extensive learning is extremely impressive. Right? The human beings, very few human beings, even if you know two languages, very few human beings can pick up arbitrary languages and do these kinds of translations. But now our computers can. Right? This is way outstripping human performance. Right, so all these things that are here on the ground, things machines can already do, and everything up here on the walls, we'll get machines can do pretty soon anyway. Machines can already translate language. They can already drive. Hold press conferences, well, maybe. Review a movie, yeah, they can do that. Right. So sort of desperate plea to identify the unique things that make us human, right? The things that distinguish us from the machines. But these things are getting fewer and far between. Because there's this argument from various disabilities that there's some X that machines can never do. I mean, you might have your own versions of these machines can't fall in love, have emotions, or whatever. I'm emphasizing this because the other objection that we talked about last time, Lady Lovelace's objection, is not like that. Lady Lovelace's objection is not an objection that machines can't do X for some X. In fact, Lady Lovelace argues explicitly that machines can do whatever we know how to order them to perform. So there's no limits on what the machine can do, according to Lovelace, as long as we're clever enough to program them. right? So Lovelace's objection is not that there's something the machines can't do, but that anything the machine does is really attributed to our abilities. In other words, Lady Lovelace's objection is an objection to machine autonomy, and not just machine intelligence. She's objecting to the idea that machines can never be autonomous. So I've talked about this a lot in the live lectures, but autonomy in the sense of self-governance. The word auto is self, nomos means law. So like law, law-giving or self-governing, something has its own laws. So something's autonomous, it is in control of itself. It governs its own self. Right? It determines its own self. It controls itself. And what Lovelace is arguing is that machines are not autonomous in this sense. Machines do not control themselves. We control machines. Right? Machines only do what humans tell them to do, what humans program them to do. It's a very common objection to AI. And I just want to emphasize one more time, the claim is not that machines don't do some particular thing, but that anything that they do is really the result of our instructing it to do those things. In other words, machines aren't autonomous, and the really big thing that philosophers think about when they talk about autonomy is responsibility. So an autonomous agent is also responsible for their actions, and responsible in the sense that they can be held accountable for their actions. Philosophers talk about responsibility in terms of blame and praise. So when you do something wrong, you get blamed for it, maybe you deserve punishment. When you do something good, you deserve praise, maybe you deserve an award or some other kind of recognition. Right? And the issue here is about desert. Do you actually deserve what you get? Do you deserve the punishment? Right? So if I decide to rob someone's house and then I get caught and thrown in jail, maybe I deserved it, right? Because I chose to do that thing. And so I deserve the punishments from getting caught. But if someone else steals, someone else robs a house and then blames me, it wouldn't be fair. I don't deserve to go to jail for that because I didn't do it. Right? It wasn't my own actions that led to that crime. So when philosophers are talking about autonomy, they want to know about desert. And what Lovelace is saying is that machines don't deserve anything because it's not really them doing the performance. It's really us doing the performance, and we're programming the machine. Now, remember last time we talked a little bit about Turing's response to Lovelace. Turing says that if you want to build a machine that does more than what it's programmed to do, then build a machine that learns. If the machine learns, then whatever they do is not just the result of their programming, but it's also a result of the experiences they've had as they've learned. Right, so all the neural network stuff that's going on today, this is machine learning. And the idea is that you don't have to program in advance how to do the task. All you have to do is program this network and then have the network learn, right? Train the network so that it learns how to do the task. And then the result isn't just the result of your programming. I mean, you did program things, you programmed the network, but the ability to solve the task, right? The thing that was actually learned was learned by the machine. And so the machine's ability to solve the task is really a product of its own learning and not simply a product of the programming. It happens in advance. Remember last time we talked a little bit about learning long division. First time you learn long division, you have to be told the algorithm. You follow the algorithm exactly. You didn't really do it on your own. Right? When you can do it on your own, that's when we say you've learned. When you can solve the problem without any support from anyone else, then we say that you've learned, and we consider you an autonomous agent in that sense. So this is a fundamental challenge when talking about autonomy. So when roboticists talk about autonomy, what they really mean is freedom from external control or influence, some sort of independence, that there's no human being doing the control, that it's really the person doing the control. And really important is that when the roboticists are talking about this, what they really mean when they say something's autonomous, like an autonomous vehicle, the self-driving Tesla cars, those autonomous vehicles are autonomous in the sense that there's no human control in the moment of operation. Obviously, someone programs the Tesla to operate that way, but it doesn't matter what anyone did beforehand. What matters for autonomy is, as it's acting in the moment, is anyone in control, right? Is there a remote controller somewhere, someone controlling from a distance, or is the machine itself in control of that operation? So you have to program in how Tesla Autopilot operates ahead of time. But once you have that program in, then the machine is what's doing all the action in the world. And they call that autonomy. I don't want the fully. I want this one. Oh, chat. Yes, Taylor says it kind of brings the legislative issue. At one point, is the computer responsible versus the person that programmed it? It's exactly the issue, right? Who's responsible for these actions? And when we're talking about these machines as being autonomous, the philosophical implication is that they're responsible, that they're the ones that are making the decisions, right? So if you look at the Tesla autopilot, so this is autopilot. Hopefully you can see this. So he's not controlling any of this. The car's controlling it itself with the cameras that it sees, and then it has some radar and sonar also. And it uses all these inputs to identify all the objects around it, especially the other cars. Notice that the resolution here isn't very good. It's just basically identifying where the cars are. And they're not more specific than that. Now, what kind of car? There's nothing about the cars except that they fit in this little rectangle. So the resolution is really bad. The car's not saying very much. But it has to make a bunch of decisions about what to do, where to go. You give it a destination, and then it has to manage all the stuff in between. And they call this a kind of autonomy. So who's responsible if this car hits someone? Well, this is the kind of thing that hasn't fully been decided yet. This is still sort of up for grabs. Tesla has its own ideas about who's responsible and when, but Google has different ideas. For Google has its own self-driving cars, and Google, in order to get these cars on the road, Google made a lot of agreements with the state governments where it got licensed. And the agreements were that if anything happens in a Google car, then Google holds itself responsible. So if there's an accident, it's not the driver's fault, it's Google's fault, the corporation. And so any accident, they're liable for. They had to, part of the agreement that they got in the states where they're allowed to operate these vehicles, in California and Nevada, part of the agreement was contingent on the fact that they accepted full responsibility. So in those cases, we have stipulated that the corporation is responsible, not the car. Tesla might want to do different than that, right? Tesla might want the driver responsible in some situations. In particular, right now, it's not their driverless cars are not fully autonomous. They require human supervision. So this idea of full autonomy, if you go onto the website, instead of updating the lecture that I had, I put these little 2016 updates down here. I have a couple of updates. The first one is the level of automations. So SAE is the Society for Automotive Engineers. This is an international engineering professional society, sort of like the NSP. And this last year, they put out a report where they identify 6 degrees of autonomy, from non-autonomous at all, 0 autonomy, to fully autonomous. And they sort of lay out what those differences are. Let's go ahead and look at this. So 6 levels of autonomy. The first 3 are where the human is mostly in charge, and the second 3 are where the car is mostly in charge. So from no automation whatsoever, where the human's entirely in control of all aspects of the driving. And then the next 2 levels are sort of partial control on the part of the machine. So for instance, level 1, you might think of like cruise control on your car. So if my car can drive in cruise control, and what that is, I just set a speed that I want to drive at, and then the car stays at that speed, even though I let off the gas. And so if I want 65 miles an hour, it'll keep it going at 65 miles an hour. The car doesn't know anything that's going on around it, so you have to sit there and continue to drive, holding the wheel, make all the directions, but the car is able to maintain a consistent speed. This is helpful if you're driving long distances and you can get lead foot. You end up going faster just because you've been sort of driving it for so long. It's tedious. You sort of step on the gas. This is one way of preventing that from happening. The machine has to be a little bit intelligent in order to do this kind of driver assistance. So if I'm driving at 65 miles an hour and I want to stay at 65 miles an hour, but then I hit an incline, a hill, well, the hill is going to make my car go slower. So in order to maintain that constant speed, I'm going to need to push on the gas and make the car go faster. And cruise control is smart enough to understand this sort of feedback process, right? With sort of monitoring its speed and making little adjustments all the time. It doesn't have any control over any other process but this one little process, and the human has to be monitoring everything else. So that's sort of the simplest kind of autonomy, one level of control for the machine. You can get increasing kinds of control where the machine has more control over specific kinds of tasks. For instance, nowadays you have cars that can do parking or parallel parking automated, right? So you just drive up alongside the slot, the parking space that you want, and then you hit a button and the car does the parking itself. But again, this is kind of partial automation. The human is really in control of all other aspects of the driving, but just this one little bit. As we get more and more autonomous, we have the machine able to handle more elaborate tasks. Conditional automation is where the machine is mostly in charge, but the human being might have to intervene in certain places. In particular, this one asks the human every once in a while if they'll intervene. The next level of automation is where the human has to make a positive act. So the system doesn't ask for the human, but the human has to actually directly intervene in order to change the task. And level 3 or 4 is about where the Tesla autopilot cars are right now. So you can set them up to drive, you can give them a destination, they'll get there most of the way. They can't do everything though. A human being is going to have to make some kinds of decisions. And especially if the weather's bad, if it's raining or something, then the machine is not going to do very well at all, and the human being has to do make a lot of decisions for it. So this is about where automation is right now. But Tesla is promising that very soon all of their cars will be level 5 full automation. That means that the human being can set the car to go and then fall asleep and not pay attention at all, because the machine can handle the entire task. Right. So right now, if a human being is driving one of these Tesla vehicles, they don't have to hold the wheel or press the gas, but they do have to monitor the whole time. Right. They have to be the sort of supervisor, because if anything goes wrong, if the machine makes a mistake, the human being has to sort of jump in and take over. And this is a challenge. It's a cognitive challenge for human beings. In psychology, they call this kind of thing task switching, where you're working on one task and you switch to some different task. And what we know from human psychology is that switching tasks is not easy. In fact, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of concentration to be able to switch tasks at all, but it takes time. So you have to sort of readjust and reorient yourself into the new task. This is why multitasking doesn't work very well. Human beings, multitasking, be writing a paper, but also have a TV on in the background and they watch it once in a while or whatever. So lots of different things, checking Facebook every once in a while. All these different tasks, you might think that you're getting more done because look at how many different things I'm doing. But in fact, every time you switch between tasks, it takes your brain a second to reorient itself. And so you actually lose more time in this task switching than you're gaining from doing all the multitasking. So multitasking usually isn't a very good idea. You would do better to just focus on one task and see it through. So this limitation on cognition that we have to sort of deliberately switch tasks and it takes a long time to do it. This means that having a supervisory role over something like driving is not the kind of thing that human brains are very good at. Right? So let's say you're in the car, you're supervising, and then something happens and you need to take over. Well, that transition from recognizing there's something wrong to now you have to take over and start driving the car, it's a big cognitive leap to do that. It's not always easy to do that, and you might end up making more mistakes in that transition than the car would have made on its own. Right, so having the human being in a sort of supervisory role, it's a challenge, and it might make things more dangerous. What we want is full automation, so the human being doesn't have to worry about it, but we don't have that yet. Part of the challenge for full automation is just the cost of it. So the Tesla vehicles that we saw earlier, they are only using video cameras plus sonar and radar. So they have little sonar beeps that they're getting feedback from, and they have little radar pings. And they use this information to construct a vision of the world. The better system to do this with is called LiDAR, is a laser detection. So instead of a sonar or radar, which is in the front of the car, There's a LiDAR thing where it's a little laser and spins around, and the laser sort of scans the whole area in front, and then you get feedback. And the feedback that you get from a LiDAR system will be much more detail, much more fine-grained detail, because lasers can be really small and fine-grained. The thing is that so it would be really nice to have these LiDAR systems. The thing is that to build a LiDAR system like that, it's very expensive, maybe like $50,000 to get a laser that's accurate enough and stable enough that it won't be miscalibrated from all the jostling around the car does. Right? So to do that, you have to gimbal the sensors. They have to be very, very sensitive equipment. So it's very expensive to build a LiDAR system like this. So the Tesla autopilots don't have LiDARs. They just use sonar and radar and video cameras. That's why it's so low resolution. It works well enough, but there have been crashes already. So yeah, so a few months ago, there was a crash back in May. There was a crash, so the car is driving down this way, autopilot. And what happened is that it was driving into the sun, so the sun was back here shining right into the face of the driver. The driver was on autopilot, so he wasn't fully paying attention, but then a truck turned in front of the car, and the truck was white, and when it turned, there was a glare from the sun, and the computer couldn't tell the difference between the glare and the truck, and so it thought there was nothing in front of it, and so it just barreled on through, and so the car ended up going underneath the truck and hitting some power poles on the side of the road, and the driver ended up dying. So here's a case where the sensors on the machine don't seem adequate to monitor the driving conditions. Now, on Tesla's view, maybe the vehicle owner was not operating it properly. So autopilot is not fully hands-off. It's not full level 5 autonomy, which means you have to be monitoring the situation. So on Tesla's view, maybe there should have been a human who was watching this, saw the truck pull up, and then made the appropriate actions themselves. And because the human being didn't do that, then maybe the human being is responsible for the crash. So we're starting to see how this autonomy is used to sort of adjust who's responsible, how we hold them responsible, and so on. Is the car responsible? Is the person responsible? I'll just say one other thing about this crash that's interesting is that the crash happened in May 7th or so. But Tesla didn't report it to the public until late June, early July. They reported it to regulators earlier than that, but the public didn't know about it until late June, early July. And interestingly, that Elon Musk found, so Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla, found out about the crash, and before going public, sold off $2 billion worth of stock in Tesla. Right, the idea is that this is going to be bad for the company, so I'm going to sell off a bunch of stock before it hurts me. So this is insider trading, probably, maybe. It shows a very sort of suspicious way of dealing with these kinds of crashes. Right? Elon Musk is not being sort of just straightforwardly honest about these crashes, but he's hiding them in order to maximize his profit. This is concerning. It's concerning about Tesla's ethics, how they're dealing with these crashes, sort of business ethics aspects of it. It's also concerning because if things go wrong, if one of these self-driving cars, ends up killing a bunch of people, there might be a big backlash. There might be a sort of public backlash against self-driving cars. You might end up getting another AI winter. Right now, the old car manufacturers don't really like Tesla very much, but they really haven't been investing a whole lot of money in the self-driving cars and the battery-operated cars. So Tesla is really trying to break new ground here. And if they do a bad job of it, it might turn people off of the self-driving cars entirely. Yeah, Taylor in the comments says it shows the confidence that Google has versus Tesla. I mean, that's right. It also, not just the confidence in the technology, but it also shows the kind of political savvy or legal savvy that Google has. Google knows what it's doing, and it knows that the best legal options for it here is to convince the state as much as possible that it's going to be a responsible user. Tesla is doing almost the exact opposite, right? It's doing a whole lot of things to make us suspicious that it's not being very responsible. In fact, that it has its sort of profit interests going above things like safety, things like again, these cars are not regulated. There are no laws about how these cars ought to behave yet, and so Tesla's sort of in untested waters. And because it's untested waters, then all the moves that Tesla makes right here is going to have long-standing implications for what happens in the near future. Oh, I didn't put the, let me find this other. So just this year, the Department of Transportation, just this year, the Department of Transportation put out a policy guide for autonomous vehicles, where they made recommendations. So I think this earlier this year, the SAE put out this standards for automated vehicles, and then the Department of Transportation put out this policy guide for how to regulate and establish the safety of these vehicles. Right. So the Department of Transportation and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. These are the federal agencies that are responsible for regulating vehicles, for setting the safety standards that they all have to meet, and so on. Are there any, Taylor asked a very interesting question. Google and Tesla are both US companies. Are there foreign companies that are dealing with automated cars in a different way? Yeah, there are. I know a bunch of German car companies, Mercedes and so on, all have, BMW, all have their own self-driving platforms that they use for their cars. All of these platforms are proprietary. Tesla's automated software is open source, so you can look at the code, but it's still their proprietary software. So I don't know that you can actually use it yourself. I know you can look at the code and inspect it, but for BMW, maybe you can't look at that code yet. Maybe they won't release that code. Proprietary software controlling these cars is another challenge, and it's partly a challenge just from the sake of, from the perspective of diversity. So when I'm driving on the road, right now, every other car on the road is driven by another human being, and I know more or less how human being brains work, right? I have to deal with them all the time. So I can use my knowledge of human behavior to anticipate, that guy's being a jerk and he's going to cut that other car off and I have to slow down because I can see all this stuff happening. Right? In other words, when I'm watching human beings on the road, I can interpret it as in its social context, and I can understand what's going on, what everyone's intentions are, why they're behaving the way they do, and so on. Maybe there's some times I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but in those cases, I usually blame it on someone being drunk, right? That car is swerving in the road, it's probably drunk. I should back off so I don't hit it or whatever. Right? In all these cases, I'm using my knowledge of how human brains work, my knowledge of social systems, to anticipate what the car is going to do. But if these cars are being controlled by software, proprietary software that I've never interacted with before, then maybe it behaves in ways that I totally can't anticipate. Right? Maybe the swerve of the car is something that I don't anticipate, I don't expect. And then what happens is it completely throws me. But not just that one automated car behaves in ways that I don't anticipate, but maybe different kinds of cars behave in different kinds of ways. Right? So maybe the BMW autopilot or the Mercedes autopilot is more aggressive than the Tesla autopilot. And so when you see a Mercedes car coming, it's going to take certain kinds of actions. But when you see the Tesla car coming, it's going to take different kinds of actions. And maybe you can use your knowledge of these specific automation platforms to decide how you're going to respond to these cars. And this isn't just a fanciful possibility. So Mercedes-Benz has these self-driving vehicles that they're starting to put on the road, and they made an announcement earlier last month, they made the announcement that their self-driving platform will prioritize the safety of passengers in the car over pedestrians that it might run into. So if the car is running, it's about to hit someone, and if it were to swerve in either direction, then maybe it would hit another car, and that would kill the passengers. In this situation, the Mercedes is going to decide to just go ahead and keep going through, even if it's going to kill the pedestrian, because it's going to prioritize the safety of its passengers over the safety of the pedestrians. This is going to be an aggressive vehicle. This is going to be a vehicle that's not going to compromise its own behavior. That's not how human beings would respond. Human beings more likely to swerve. But we can, maybe we can know ahead of time that this car is not going to swerve, and maybe that's going to change the way that we deal with it. And part of the challenge is that maybe this car doesn't swerve, maybe other cars do swerve. And so when we see a car coming, how do we know what it's going to do? It's a social challenge. As the highways become more diverse, the more different kinds of agents doing different kinds of things, it becomes more difficult to sort your way through that. So the DOT and NHTSA have started thinking about how to regulate these self-driving cars. And in this report, I'll put this report up on the website, but in this report they talk about the different regulatory tools that they might use. They talk about the SAE 5 levels of automation. And then what they do is they give, here's the 5 levels of automation. What they do is they give a list of things that should be checked, right? So each one of these are different sort of things that need to be considered when evaluating the safety regulations governing these cars. Right? So how does it operate? What is the response? What are the safety fallbacks if something goes wrong? And they have this for each one of these different categories. And they have, I think, like 16 different categories. These are all different categories for consideration for how well the machine performs. So some of these are pretty obvious, like crashworthiness. How well does it do in a crash? Which is already standard, a standard kind of check for for these vehicles. But it's also asking things about, like, for instance, privacy or cybersecurity. There's a big threat for these machines getting hacked. If they're online, and someone can hack them and then take control of the machine from a distance, and that's really worrying. Right? So the safety of these machines is going to require that they have the proper kind of security, the proper kind of privacy. Yeah, Edward makes a good point. He says Mercedes is promoting the strategy because they don't want people don't want to buy a car where the owner is going to get killed over a pedestrian. The car's programmed to make the ethical decision for you. Right, that's right. Right, and it's not. It shouldn't be coincidental that Mercedes-Benz are also very expensive cars. Right, so these are rich people who prefer their cars over the pedestrians around them. Right, so right, this isn't just what is the right decision, but it also factors into things like class and all sorts of other ethical considerations that need to be brought up in this context. I didn't really talk about this last time. I probably should talk about this a little bit more now. So philosophers have started talking about this kind of challenge. Who does the car hit? In terms of the tunnel problem, they don't have a good example of tunnel. Yeah, so imagine you're driving up to a tunnel like this, where on both sides of the tunnel is like a steep cliff. Right, so it's just this one road. You're heading straight to the tunnel, and anything off to the side is gonna kill you. And then a kid runs in front of the tunnel entrance, like running after a ball or something. So if you swerve in either direction, you're gonna fall off the side, or you're gonna hit the walls of the cliffs that you're about to run into, sort of Wile E. Coyote style. Right, so none of those options are good for the passengers. On the other hand, there's the kid. If you keep going, you're going to hit and kill the kid. So what decision do you make? People have been talking about this in terms of the tunnel problem, sort of model and the trolley problem. Remember, the trolley problem is, do you pull the lever or not in the runaway trolley? So the question here is, do you pull the lever or not for the runaway trolley? And then the question with the tunnel problem is, do you swerve or do you keep driving straight? If you remember the trolley case, there's lots of different ways of answering this question, lots of different reasons you can give. And there's been lots of discussion about how cars should handle these kinds of cases. So when Mercedes says it's going to prioritize the passenger, what they're doing is they're taking a stand on the tunnel problem. They're saying the passengers should always be prioritized.
I think it's a little different from the Charlie case because in this scenario, you have the boys running out in front of a road. It's more like he's basically breaking a law. You know, like you're not supposed to jaywalk, you're not supposed to cross the street in undesignated areas. So, I mean, I think the car should be programmed to follow the law. So, like somebody just jumps out in front of the street, you shouldn't drive your car off the road because they're technically wrong. You know, you're following the traffic laws. They're not. So
yeah, well, good, but the penalty for jaywalking is usually not execution, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I know what you mean, but you know, you have to make a decision eventually if you're going to have these cars on the road, and they have to make a choice. And
Yeah.
I think it's logical to go by whatever the traffic laws are. So, because there may be a boy inside the car, you know, you could equate to that, and you may kill the boy that's inside the car as a passenger, as opposed to the boy running across the street.
Yeah, these are all great points. And there's lots of ways to reason about this. I'll just point out this moral machine. I'll put this on the website also. Moralmachine.mit.edu. MIT has, last few months, been trying to gather intuitions about this. So they built this little website where they show you two different versions. What should the self-driving car do? And in these versions, there's certain people walking the street, and there's certain people in the car, and you have to decide who you should prioritize. So in this case, there's a dog in the car and no one else. And if the dog, if it keeps going straight, it's going to hit this barrier and the dog's going to die. But if it swerves, it's going to hit this person and the person's going to die. So is it more important to save the dog than the person? Let's say the person is more important. I'm sorry. What should a self-driving car do? Let me just go this way. So let's go this way. So it's just a bunch of these sort of trolley cases where they show different situations. So in this one, it's a bunch of old people that die versus a bunch of young people that die. So who do you save? Let's let the old people die. So you can make different little sort of decisions like this, decide the fate of these different things. I mean, it seems kind of cute. It seems sort of like the sort of style experiments, like the trolley problem. But the thing is that this matters in the sense that this is going to go into a real machine. That's, you know, a real 2-ton vehicle is going to be moving around the road, can actually kill people. Right? So managing these kinds of systems, it's going to be a big challenge. Let me read some of the chat. Someone wouldn't blame a person for hitting a kid that jumped in the road, but they might blame a computer. Yeah, right. I mean, this is another part of the point is that we might have higher standards for these computers. I mean, we talked about this in class a whole lot. That 30,000 people, 35,000 people every year die in the United States alone. Die from car accidents. Right? So 35,000 people. It's a lot of people that die every year from car accidents, and no one thinks that this number of deaths means that we should get all the cars off the road. But maybe when these automated vehicles start killing people, and say they kill people in similar numbers, maybe slightly less, maybe 20,000 people died from automated vehicles a year. Do we just accept that the way that we accept the human beings that are killing people, or do we put tighter regulations on it? Do we hold the machines to a higher standard? Right? I'm raising all these questions now partly because these are the questions that are being decided right now. Right? These things don't have firm policy. A lot of the stuff is being decided sort of as we speak by committees thinking about this stuff sometimes for the first time. Right? So Department of Transportation letter here. This is the first devoted discussion that the Department of Transportation has had about autonomous vehicles at all. I mean, they're already on the roads. They're already killing people on the roads. But now we're starting to actually take it seriously. So privacy, cybersecurity concerns about make sure that's not being hacked. There's a lot of discussion here about just what data do you record, to make sure that all the decisions are being recorded, that they're being recorded in a secure place that's going to survive any crash scenario, that information can be recovered in the right sort of way so that we can actually look and see what happened. Right, all of these things need to be built into the system for it to be safe, according to the DOT regulations here. I do like that they just have a blank sort of ethical considerations category here. And it shows how far engineering ethics has come, that in this sort of initial discussion of autonomous vehicles, we already have in this initial discussion some consideration of the ethics of these decisions. There's lots of other considerations also, but the fact that ethics is up here at all seems like progress to me. Okay, so that was the Department of Transportation level of autonomy. It's also worth mentioning that not only is the Department of Transportation dealing with this stuff, but so is the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration. FAA is the federal body that regulates aircraft. In particular, airplanes, any airplane has to be, the safety standards for how these airplanes operate is all governed by the FAA. And they've been promising to do regulations on drones because there's lots of commercial interests for drone technologies. So Amazon, for instance, Amazon right now is almost single-handedly propping up the United States Postal Service. The United States Postal Service would be bankrupt right now if Amazon weren't funding a large part of its operation. But even still, the United States Postal Service is not very good. They don't deliver all the days. In fact, Amazon has just recently convinced them to start delivering on Sundays. But they also only deliver between certain times. They're also overloaded from all other stuff they have to deliver. USPS isn't great. I live in New York City, and getting packages delivered is a nightmare. If the packages get there at all, they get there completely damaged and busted. But then sometimes they don't even make it to your door. Sometimes they make it to your door and then get stolen from your door. These are all challenges with the delivery systems we have today. And from Amazon's perspective, they're contracting out these delivery services, but Amazon gets all the complaints from customers when the packages are poorly delivered. So Amazon would really like to just route around all this delivery stuff and be able to do it directly on their own, right? So to have a little fleet of drones so they can just send out the air, drive themselves, fly themselves to wherever they need to go, drop off the package and return. For Amazon to do something like this, they would need permits and licenses, and there's no permitting process to do anything like this yet. The FAA is supposed to come up with these regulations, and they're making some progress, but they're being very, very slow about it. So we don't really know how this works for commercial applications, but not just commercial applications, but also for civilian applications. So for instance, the press, if you've been paying attention to the news at all, you know that there's a war going on right now in North Dakota, where, and I mean war in the serious sense, where they're shooting bullets and putting people in the hospitals or in cages. But this is way out in the middle of nowhere. It's really hard to get to at all. And then to cover it, maybe you need a helicopter, but that's very expensive. So being able to cover this kind of stuff, a lot of the journalist outfits are using these drones to get aerial footage, do reporting. Some of these drones are owned and operated by actual journalist outfits, and some of them are just civilian. These drones are also really easy to pick out of the sky. You just need to swipe them out of the sky. So I know that there's been drones standing rock that have been shot out of the sky by the police. It's not the easiest thing to do. This is from a few months ago. So having access to these drones is important for this kind of citizen journalism. If you don't have access to these drones for like $100 where you can do this kind of thing, the next best option is something like a helicopter, which requires a much bigger set of resources to operate. Right. So part of the point is that you get news in the hands of the people, journalism in the hands of the people. And this is part of the challenge with building these regulations for the FAA. So not only are they interested in things like safety. I mean, if one of these drones falls out of the sky or whatever, hits someone on the head, it's going to hurt. We can easily kill someone with these drones accidentally, just from an accident. But not only that, but there's all sorts of other kinds of cases that the FAA wants to regulate. So for instance, over a sports stadium, so it's some open air sports stadium, like a football stadium, that's open to the air. That means that anyone can maybe fly their drone over it and take their own footage of the broadcast of the game, and maybe broadcast their own version of the game. That would go against the regulations on the. That would go against the NFL's wishes, right? NFL wants to have complete control over how they disseminate, right, their sort of network control. That's where they make all their money. So they don't want to have people being able to get this footage elsewhere. So when you look at the laws, the regulations for how to operate these drones in civilian contexts, there's going to be a bunch of places where you're not allowed to go. A lot of these places are things like over sports stadiums, over airports, this kind of stuff. Right, there's safety reasons for this. There's also sort of information control reasons for this. Again, this stuff is all being settled right now. The FAA is farther behind than the Department of Transportation in terms of getting these regulations up and running, getting them actually being applied in real cases. But this stuff is all being decided like this year. So if you're interested in this stuff, it's happening right now. You can get involved pretty easily. The topic this week is about these autonomous drones, autonomous vehicles, but also about autonomous weapon systems. An autonomous weapon system is a weapon system that can target, track, and deploy munitions against some target. It's fully autonomous in the relevant sense for autonomous weapons. It's fully autonomous if the human being is making. It's fully autonomous if the machine is making the final kill decisions. So, if there's a kill button to fire or whatever, if it's a human being who says when that button gets pushed, then it's not autonomous. But if it's the machine deciding for itself when to fire, then it is autonomous. The issue here is humans in the control loop. Are there humans in the control loop? So just a couple of cases to consider. This first one, I might have shown this before. This is the Samsung SDR1. As soon as it loads. SDR1 is an automated turret. It's built by Samsung, the same Samsung that built your phone. Samsung is a South Korean company. South Korea and North Korea are still in an active war. There's an active demilitarized zone across the border. And a few years ago, here we go. So these are automated turrets. These turrets have a little camera on them where they can scan around, find moving targets, lock onto that target and track those targets, and then fire. When these things were originally built, they were designed to fire sort of at will. As soon as you saw a moving target within a certain radius, then just open fire on it. So these were considered autonomous vehicles. And they're autonomous in the sense that no person had to decide when to fire. It fired as soon as there was movement in front of it at a certain distance. When Samsung announced when South Korea announced that they were putting these turrets on the demilitarized zone, it caused a huge backlash, public outcry. People didn't like that there was this automated, what if someone who shouldn't have been there runs in front of the turret? It shouldn't be just a machine deciding who it fires at. It should be a person deciding who it fires at. And so because of this backlash, South Korea changed its policy where they still have these turrets up, but now these turrets require a person to monitor and supervise them at all times, and it doesn't shoot unless the person okays engagement. Right? So it doesn't fire on its own. It fires only when someone makes the call. That's how most of these automated systems work now. There has to be some person to make the call. So I have some example of these Talon robots. These are very commonly deployed with troops nowadays. Usually any unit out in the field is going to also have a military robot. Is going to have an operator as part of the crew to man this robot. These robots are not autonomous at all. These robots are controlled entirely. So there's someone with remote control who tells the robot everything that it does. Notice it's fitted with weapon systems, right? There's a machine gun on it. But that machine gun will only fire if the person who's controlling the system tells it to fire. This is where robotics is right now with the military. We have lots of robots in the military, but they're almost all entirely remote controlled in this way, right? There's sort of very strong control. And this is how the military likes it, right? So the whole guiding philosophy of the military is for command and control. You want to have as much control as possible in situations so you can dictate how it goes. This goes not just for the robots, but for the people also, right? So the gunner in some troops, they might have the gun, they might be the one responsible for operating that gun, but they don't get to fire that gun unless they get the command that they're allowed to fire that gun, and that command comes from their superior officers, who probably got that command from superior officers well up the chain, right? So that gunner is not going to start firing until he has the okay, right? So this is this command control. So even the human beings are not fully autonomous in the military. The human beings are operating under this framework of command and control. And so you don't want the machines to break down that control. You don't want the machines to do things on its own. You want the machines to do things according to the control that the whole system is trying to impose. For this reason, the US military has had for the longest time is its policy that it doesn't try to automate its weapons, that the weapons always have some human being in control. This has been the policy for the longest time, but this looks like it's changed recently. So this is a new DoD, so I have a couple of DoD reports. The old DoD report they had up in the main text, it talks about autonomy a little bit, and one of the things, it makes this argument that, look, if you make the system too autonomous, then you're not going to be able to control it, and what we want in these situations is very strong control, so automation sort of works against these interests. Again, this has been the plan, this has been the policy from the US for a long time, but they just recently released in June of this year another report on autonomy. I would recommend you looking through these, flip through these to get a sense of how the military thinks about. This is this is a public report. This isn't confidential or anything, but it's giving an assessment of how the military is viewing these autonomous weapon systems and what they might be useful for. And in this report, contrary to the U.S. policy up until this time, the Navy actually makes a recommendation for, I think, $150 million to be spent over the next 5 years researching autonomous weapon systems. That is, weapon systems that can target, track, and kill in combat environments. In particular, the thing that they're most interested in is distributed systems, so systems made up of lots of little tiny parts that can come together to track a combatant and execute on it. So the military has had this general policy of wanting complete control. Now that said, that doesn't mean that they completely avoid autonomous weapon systems. There's a lot of autonomous weapon systems commonly used in war, and they really don't have to be that sophisticated. The sort of simplest kind of autonomous weapon system you might think about is a landmine. A landmine is an explosive device, is a bomb. You bury it underground, and the idea is that it gets set off when someone walks over it. It's set off whenever anyone walks over it, so the bomb isn't paying attention to who's walking over it, if it's actually someone that they want to kill, or if it's someone who's innocent who just happens to be walking through. Landmines become especially dangerous after a war is over. So you dig up a field, you put a bunch of landmines in it, and then the war ends. And when the war ends, no one's going to go back into that field and dig up those landmines. And no one remembers where they are. No one's going to go back and dig them up. And so they just sit there, and it becomes a big hazard. Years can go by, and people who don't even remember that the war happened might be walking through and getting exploded by a bomb underneath the ground. And right, the idea is that the bomb here was triggered to go off automatically, and so you don't need a person making the decision. It's just going to go off by itself. So this is a big trouble. There's more sophisticated versions of the same kind of thing. In the big Navy ships, if I remember correctly, they don't use these missiles anymore. I forget the name of the missile. I need to look it up. But there was this missile that used to be on all the Navy ships, and it was designed for long-range combat. So if a ship was fighting another ship, but the other ship was so far away that it was over the curve of the horizon, so you couldn't actually see where the ship was, then there were these special missiles. And what you do, so I know I want to engage that target, but it's over the horizon, so I can't see the target. So I'm going to go ahead and launch against the target now that I can't see. And then the idea is that when the missile gets into eyesight, of the target, then it can do all the rest of the work. It can acquire and direct itself to hit that target. We've had these kinds of weapon systems, these sort of automatic targeting weapon systems, for a very long time, a couple of decades now. They haven't been used, as far as we know, in combat situations because people don't like using them. It turns out that if you're a captain of a ship in the military, you don't like firing on targets you can't see. Then if you fire on a target, you want to know that you want to know exactly what target you're firing on. So it turns out that they didn't tend to use these systems very much. Another, just for completeness, another kind of system like this are the automated missile defense systems. So back in the Cold War, when we were really worried about Russians bombing us at any moment, and the worry is that if they bomb us, we won't have enough time to respond. So they set up all these automated weapon, sort of missile, they call them missile defense systems. And the idea is that if we detect an incoming missile, so these aren't designed to be aggressive to attack someone else, but if we find an incoming missile, then the system is automated so that as soon as it detects this incoming missile, it automatically scrambles countermeasures to make the bomb explode in the sky, so it doesn't actually hit land. But the thing is that this has to happen really fast. Right? If it doesn't, if the missile detection system doesn't immediately launch its countermeasures, then it won't be successful. And if you delay that at all, if you wait any time for a human being to okay the launch, for instance, then you might miss that window of opportunity. So these automated missile defense systems tend to be automated. But when we talk about autonomous weapon systems, mostly what people are thinking about are the drones. I'll go like this. So the US has a bunch of these different kinds of drones. Maybe the most famous one is the Predator drone. Predator drone carries missiles on it, carries payload, and you can drop on it. This is unmanned, so there's no person in the vehicle, but it will drop its bombs on civilians below. The military drones, there's two kinds. There's surveillance drones. Surveillance drones usually fly really high, and they can stay in the air for a week at a time, maybe more than a week at a time, consistently in the air, and sort of just circles over a place and takes a bunch of pictures. But then there's these sort of combat drones that they don't have any air-to-air abilities, but they can drop these bombs, and they can do it from very far away. If you live in Afghanistan, you know the sound of one of these droning, buzzing drones flying overhead about to drop bombs. But these are not, so they're unmanned. There's no person inside the vehicle, but they're not autonomous almost at all. These systems are controlled and they're piloted by a pilot who's on the ground back at the base station. So the pilot's not put in any harm's way, but they have total control of what the drone is doing. On the website, I linked to this. It's a few years old now, but this is the NOVA documentary, 2013, where they look at these drones. Not only do they go through the drones, but they talk about how they work, what kind of things they can see. They also give you sort of views from the drones. They also talk to the pilots of the drones and the different various difficulties piloting aircraft. And they also talk to a lot of the protesters who are worried about these drones. So drone operators, they call it success when they successfully target and kill someone. They call them bug splats because they're flying way overhead and all you see on the ground is a little black spot where the bomb hit. Let me see if I can find an image of the actual bug spot. Yeah, so all this dead people. I guess so. I mean, you can imagine just a little, these kind of things, little black spots on the ground where we've dropped bombs, killed a bunch of people. So one response to this kind of thing, they've seen, I think it's in Afghanistan or Pakistan. This is Pakistan. So these farmers put a big picture. This is a girl who died. A girl, maybe boy. A child who died in the drone strikes. An innocent child died during these drone strikes. And the thing is that if you're a drone operator working way up here, then emotionally it's not that hard to drop bombs in these little specks, right? The little dots, the little bug splats. It's not that hard because there's so much distance between them. Right? So the idea is that you put this little picture up here so you can remember that, oh wait, these people are actually human beings, with eyes and so on, and emotions, and maybe have so these Pakistani villagers are putting these images on the ground specifically to talk to the drone operators to remind them that they're targeting people. So with this in mind, maybe we should look at how these drones happened to these drones the last few years. So this is on the website. This is this interactive guide to drone strikes. So what we'll see here are all the drone strikes between 2004 and 2015, I believe. This is just in Pakistan, so this isn't in Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere else, Syria. This is just the drone strikes in Pakistan that we know about. So the US policy is that we keep track of US US casualties. Right? So if there are any soldiers that die, we keep track of that. But any civilian casualties or enemy casualties, we don't track those at all. So we don't report at all how many people we've killed from our drones. We leave that to the locals to report. So this is all information from newspapers and so on of all the drone strikes. For each one of these lines is one drone strike. And then the numbers, the little lines underneath, are how many people died. So the bright red are children that have died from these drone strikes. The dark red is civilians. The bright white are all the actual targets that we're trying to kill. And then the rest of the numbers are just other people that died. So from these drone strikes over this period of time, something like 3,000 people get killed, total fatalities, like 3,800, something like that. 3,300. Yeah, 3,300. So what they consider here up to 2015, 3,300 people die. Of those 3,300, 52 were actually targets that we were looking to kill, and the rest were just bystanders. A couple of things to point out here. Remember that 2008 is when Obama was elected, right? So before this is George W. Bush, and after this, Obama takes office in 2009, the beginning of 2009. So all this stuff is George W. Bush drone strikes, and all of this is Obama drone strikes. The point is that Obama has radically escalated the amount of drone strikes that we've used. He's basically put drone operations as the centerpiece of his foreign military operations. This wasn't the case before Obama. Before this, we would actually go to war, put boots on the ground, use traditional military operations. We did some drone strikes, but not very many. George Bush didn't like the drone strikes very much, especially because they didn't go very well. Quite a number of the drone strikes that George W. Bush did ended in tragedy. This is the biggest one, this big long red line here. All those red lines are kids. In 2006, we bombed a school. We thought it was a terrorist training camp. We thought it was a training camp for the Taliban. In fact, it wasn't a training camp for the Taliban. It was this elementary school with a bunch of kids in it. And so we killed something like 70 kids. 82 people died entirely. No actual targets were killed. I mean, think for a second what would happen if another country bombed one of our schools. How would the United States react to like a school in Newark being bombed? We would go crazy. We would go nuclear. But we do this. We do this overseas all the time. We bomb schools and hospitals and funerals.
This situation almost makes me think that it would be better to have machines make the decisions, because humans, when we put ourselves in a loop, we seem to, throughout history, make very poor decisions.
And that's really how everyone's thinking about automation. With the automated vehicles, cars kill a lot of people, but if we can kill slightly less people, right? Humans make bad mistakes. If we can make, right, we don't have to make perfect machines, but if we can make the machines that just do better than the humans, then we'll be saving lives. And the military thinks the same way. Look, these drones, they take our soldiers out of harm's way. Fewer U.S. soldiers are going to be dying because of these strikes. And in fact, fewer people in general, right? So, right, the idea is that, look, if we do these targeted strikes, some people die, some innocent civilians die, okay, but a lot more innocent civilians would die if we were, dropping a few thousand troops on the ground to do these same actions. That would be a much more disruptive, much more costly, both in terms of resources and in terms of life. And so, from the military perspective, look, if we can automate all this stuff, then not only do we save money, but we save a lot of life. It's just a lot safer. And as we've been seeing, part of the issue here is about assigning responsibility and blame. I mean, this is one of the challenges here. So, okay, so let's say the military builds a killbot that makes kill decisions on its own, and then say that killbot goes through a school and shoots up a bunch of children. What does the military say after that? Does the military take responsibility for that and say, "Oh, it was our fault, we did that"? Or does the military say, "Well, it was the machine. The machine's autonomous. It was deciding for itself. We didn't have control over it. Maybe we should throw that robot in jail." Part of the point here is that we've seen this in ethics class already several times, this sort of diffusion of responsibility. We don't like to shoulder the responsibility on our own selves, and so we look for ways of blaming other people, right? Bringing other people, making other people responsible. Well, autonomy, or sort of machine autonomy, is a sort of blank check for making other things responsible. Well, it's not really us doing it; it's these other things, right? It's the system. The machine learned how to do it. And this is a big danger. It's a big danger because it means that the human beings aren't taking as much responsibility for what they do. They're leaving it to these machines that are, the machines might end up being riskier than their human counterparts. I mean, so for instance, these drones, right? The argument here is that if these were human beings doing these operations, it would be more costly in terms of life. Right? If you were putting human soldiers down there shooting their guns, there are a lot more innocent people would die. So this is actually better than the alternative. Well, I mean, that might sound right, but would we actually engage in all these operations if we had to put troops on the ground? Right? Maybe because it would cost so much to put troops on the ground, we just don't do any of these operations at all. And so no one dies.
But Professor, in a way, what's it called? The ideal troop is basically a drone, basically. It's, you tell it what to do, there is no emotion behind it and stuff. They're going to do exactly 100% of your command and stuff. So in a way, yeah, the future likes that they're going to get results how they want it, especially the people in power. So.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I think that's how the military is thinking about this. They want control. There's positives and negatives to this already. I'm starting to run out of time, but let me just move on to this last little bit. So there's lots of stuff about automated weapon systems in here that you might think about, but I've mentioned this before, I think, but let me mention this again. There's the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, which is an actual group. They really exist because we need such a thing in 2016. So the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, it's a group. They mostly petition governments and the UN. They do most of their work with the UN, where they're trying to establish regulations, arms control over autonomous weapon systems. And the big thing that they want is humans meaningfully in the control loop. Right? So they want humans making the kill decisions. They want to have some person who they can hold responsible to be the one who's making these decisions. Right? So maybe the robot does the targeting and killing itself, but as long as there's a human being who told it to do that specific thing, so that if anything goes wrong, we can go back to that person and say, "Oh, you're responsible. You're the person to punish. You're where the system needs to be corrected." Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, they want humans meaningfully in the control loop. Right? The point is not to outlaw robotic weapon systems entirely, but just to make sure that they're not fully automated and that there's always a human being meaningfully involved. And they stress the meaningfully, right? So it's not just the supervisory role where I'm sort of watching as all these, I set out all my war robots and they're on the field, and I sort of watch from out high like a general on my horse on the hill nearby. Right? That's too distant of influence. What they want is someone in the decision-making process itself making the moment-to-moment decisions, especially about kill decisions. Right? Do we fire on these people? Right? Do we consider them enemy combatants to allow open fire, or do we not? Right? These are decisions that human beings have to make right now, and But the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots wants is for it to continue to be human beings making these decisions, to have a kind of a ban on developing weapon systems where human beings are not in the control loop at all. The Campaign to Stop Killer Robots points to things like the chemical weapons bans, right? So we have successful treaties about certain kinds of weapons that we think aren't good, right? So, war is hell. We understand that war is a terrible thing, but even admitting that war is hell, there's some things that we think are too inhumane to allow to be used in a war environment. So chemical weapons, nuclear weapons also, right? There's treaties against nuclear weapons development. And if someone tries to start developing nuclear weapons, the whole international community takes notice, right? They might put sanctions on the country, or they might do other things in response, right? Because everyone agrees, everyone signs these treaties that say nuclear weapons are bad and we're not going to develop them anymore. And the treaties commit us to preventing other people from developing those same weapons. So we have nuclear weapons treaties, we have chemical weapons treaties, biological weapons treaties, right? Where the signing nations, which are most of the member nations of the United Nations, where these countries pledge to not to develop these weapons, to take actions against anyone who does, and to recognize that this is not something that we're going to accept. So the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots wants us to do the same thing for robotic weapon systems. You hear people say, well, people who treat this stuff as inevitable. Eventually there's going to be robot soldiers. Eventually they're going to be shooting people. You hear people say things like, we better stop this before it starts. Well, this isn't right of the history, right? Chemical weapons have been used in warfare, right? World War I was a chemical weapons war. We used a lot of chemical weapons in World War I. And it was because that war was so terrible that we realized that we don't want to do that anymore. It was after these weapons had already been deployed in real warfare that we decided that it was too much and we pulled back. So same kind of thing is being advocated here. To put limits on how people develop these machines. The Campaign to Stop Killer Robots has been petitioning the UN for a long time. The other issue, or the other movement on this front, was this open letter. So FLI, Future of Life Institute. It's a think tank to go over existential risks to humanity. So before this, they were mostly thinking about global warming, meteor showers, right? A big asteroid hits planet Earth, and we were all in trouble. Right? So it's a think tank, a bunch of researchers thinking about the nature of these existential risks, how risky are they, what can we do to prevent them, and so on. And in 2015, so in the summer of 2015, the Future of Life Institute got a $10 million grant from Elon Musk. Elon Musk gave FLI $10 million to research the threats from autonomous weapons. Before this, Elon Musk had been going on news shows talking about Terminators taking over, robots taking over the world, robot warfare, and so on. And a lot of what he was saying was sort of science fiction hype, a lot scarier than the realities on the ground. And for a long time, the artificial intelligence community has been very critical of Elon Musk for giving these sort of scary predictions. But to his credit, Musk heard these concerns and put his money where his mouth is and spent $10 million to have researchers actually do the research to figure out how dangerous these resources are. So the $10 million, let me see if I can find it really quickly. I don't have the references here. They have the lists of all the different, it wasn't just one group that got the $10 million, but a bunch of different people, all working through the Future of Life, got pieces of this money, including some of the people who work for the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots. And so this big donation to research was coupled with this open letter. This is Autonomous Weapons, an open letter from AI robotics and researchers. It's a very short letter. And then the letter is signed by a lot of really famous AI robotics researchers. Stuart Russell, who wrote the book on AI, Eric Horvitz, another AI person. Yann LeCun, he was at the AI conference. In fact, a lot of these people were at the AI conference. I put the links to the AI conference in the extra credit, I believe. So if you go to the extra credit forum, In the ethics of your field, there's a little discussion of AI. Stuart Russell gave a talk at that conference. Jan LeCun gave a talk at that conference. And Peter Asaro, who's one of my friends and works with Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, he also gave a talk. And his talk at the AI conference was explicitly about killer robots. So you might want to, if you're interested in this stuff, in some of the technologies behind it, you might go look at that talk. Peter Asaro, I believe I have some of his. Last week I had you read an essay of his. Peter Asaro, this. What do you want from a robot ethic? Okay, so all these researchers got together and signed this letter. So like a bunch of really famous AI researchers and then a bunch of other people, other endorsers. And if you go to the full list, something like thousands of signatories, 20,000 signatories, including a whole bunch of AI researchers. Including AI researcher Daniel Estrada from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, signed this letter. But then a bunch of other people also signed this letter. And the letter expresses the concerns that roboticists and artificial intelligence researchers have over AI. I'll let you read the whole letter yourself, but they call automation the third revolution in warfare after gunpowder and nuclear arms. And the idea is that it opens up a new kind of arms race, and this is the worry that these researchers have, is that this is a new arms race for escalating threat. Just like we had with nuclear weapons, right, where through the Cold War we started with nuclear weapons, got to the point where it was a legitimate threat to our continuation as a species, and we don't want to start that again. Right? So these AI researchers are arguing that having another global arms race over autonomous weapons will be even more dangerous, partly because autonomous weapons are not that hard to build compared to nuclear weapons. In order to have a nuclear weapons program, you need to refine plutonium, and that's a big engineering task. Right? You need centrifuges, you need a bunch of gear to be able to refine nuclear weapons. You don't need the same gear to refine automated weapons. In fact, you can buy automated weapons with off-the-shelf parts, right? Really simple stuff. All the AI software is free online, right? So there's no technical challenge or resource challenge for developing autonomous weapons the same way there was with nuclear weapons. But autonomous weapons can have the same kind of impact on the level of nuclear weapons in terms of the capacity for mass killing very cheaply large groups of people. So they say, just as chemists and biologists have no interest in building biological or chemical weapons, most AI researchers have no interest in building AI weapons and do not want to tarnish their field by doing so, potentially creating a major public backlash against AI that curtails its future societal benefits. Indeed, chemists and biologists have broadly supported international agreements that successfully prohibited chemical and biological weapons, just as most physicists supported treaties banning the space-based nuclear weapons and blinding laser weapons. Right? Physicists have these same kinds of sort of industry-wide agreements to not work on these weapons. Some do, but it's sort of not, it's not taken well, and then sometimes there's treaties against it. And so the goal here is to have the same kind of thing for artificial intelligence. Starting a military arms race is a bad idea and should be prevented by a ban on offensive autonomous weapons beyond meaningful human control. Right? This meaningful human control is really what's the goal. These are AI researchers, right? So these people are not against artificial intelligence. They're very pro-artificial intelligence, but they're against the weapon systems. And they try to make that explicit. Okay, so I'm way over time. I'm going to go ahead and end here unless you guys have any questions, comments, concerns. I have a bunch of these resources online. There's a lot of details here. Pick something that you're interested in and try to go deep, right? Try not to just do superficial stuff about it, but try to go deep. Try to actually look up some of the research, explore some of these documents from the Department of Defense, see if you can't learn something, help teach the class. No, you didn't miss the password. Let's make the password let's make the password drone. So put drone on the sign-in sheet. read these reports. I strongly recommend you flipping through these reports. Read the reports from the SAE and also from the DOT. Because, like I said, this stuff is happening right now, and if you're interested in this stuff, you can make a career right now. You can go out. Lots of low-hanging fruit, lots of things that haven't been tried yet, haven't been tested yet, and so sort of any progress in these areas can have a substantial impact on the future of these technologies. So I've got a lot of resources here. I hope you enjoy some of it. I'm excited to see what you write on the website. Any other questions, comments? Concerns? Oh no, it's not 3 responses, and I think I changed that. Let me make sure. So it says 3 responses. It should be 2 responses. I need to go back and change that. So it should be 2 responses for week 12. Sorry about that. That was from last year where I made students do 3 responses. 2 responses this week, 2 responses next week also. Next week we'll talk about technological unemployment and other impacts on the economy from automation. I hope this stuff is interesting. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for your questions, thanks for your contributions.
Thank you, Professor.
I'll see you next week.